Alright, so welcome back to step 2 in the process of making your own epoxy and wood table. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to build a form like I did, this one right here. And we're going to go through setting up the actual wood in the form, getting it ready for the big pour. So my form, this is how I built it. And I've already used this once before, so I'm reusing it again for the second time. So I went out to the big box store and I bought some MDF wood. Now this wood here, I bought 2 panels of it. And these are the actual panels that they use for making like cabinets and stuff like that, shelves. That's what this is. So they're 24 inches long by 8 feet long. And what I did was I cut a foot off the end because I didn't need 8 feet. And I took 4 2x4s, cut them in half, and at every foot I put a 2x4 to support it. So what I did was I put a screw here on the top, one right here, another one right here, and then one at the bottom. So this way they have 4 screws in each one and it's solid. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to put it on my table, and then we're going to lower, we're going to put the actual slab into it. And from there, we'll build the sides up, silicone everything down, and get ready for step 3, which is the pour.
So as I mentioned before, I used this form once before, and there I'm just patching up any places where I may have scratched or torn off some of the tuck tape. And as you can see, my son is always there to help me. So in this next part, I'm going to show you how I quickly put together my boxes. Now, of course, they would be a lot longer, the wood, but I just take 1x3s, or those are 1x4s. I drill pilot holes in and then just put 1 screw in. Next, I take this piece of wood. It's 3/4 of an inch thick by 1.5 inches wide. And I cut the ends on a 45-degree angle so that this way, when I put it down, I know all I got to do is really line up the wood so that it's perfectly in line with the 1x4, and I'm good to go. But what I do is I take that square and I'll put it in the corner, and then I will ensure that the 1x4s are exactly at a 90-degree angle, and I'll drive the nails in. Now here's my secret to making sure you never get a corner leak. What I do is I take a spatula and I'll take a piece of tuck tape and I'll invert it so the sticky side is out. Then from there, I will place the spatula in the corner and make sure my tuck tape sticks to the sides of the actual 1x3s or 1x4s that you see there. Now that I have the walls of my form built, I place it on my tabletop and I draw with a Sharpie around the inside and the outside of the 1x3. This way I know exactly where I'm going to put the silicone when I'm ready to seal the form. Next, I'm going to center the tabletop exactly where I want it in my form.
So this is exactly where I want my table to sit in the form. As I mentioned, I'm going to take my Sharpie and I'm going to draw around the outside of the wood so that I know when I go to silicone it down, because we're going to leave one side as a live edge and the other side will be a nice straight finish, and it'll be in resin on this side over here. I'm going to take off the form here, the walls around it. I'm going to draw around it, and then from there I'm going to start to then raise the actual tabletop. From there, silicone and start putting everything in place, weighting it down, and the whole works. And then we'll silicone the sides down as well. Alright, so I drew my line all around now the tabletop, the wood itself, the live edge. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure 7 inches in from here, because that's where I notice I got a nice solid piece of wood. It's solid for about the first, I don't know, 10 inches, and then there's a crack over there, because I'm going to put a few layers of silicone down because I want to keep this as a live edge. So if I don't create a barrier between where the silicone is and where the live edge is, the silicone will eventually, it's liquid, find its way over to the other side and start filling up in here. And I don't want that. I want this to be remain live edge wood with no resin on that. So 7 inches, I made a mark, and over here I'm just going to take this, make a mark, and 7 inches here. So just going to put an arrow. And like I said, I'm going to lift this table up, put the 2x4s underneath so it's suspended, and I'm going to put 2 or 3 rows of lines of silicone, and then I'm going to drop the table down and I'm going to put it right back because I know where it's got to be in where the lines are, and I know that I've got a solid line and that everything will be good. Then I will take some clamps and I'll clamp it down, because I learned the hard way on my very first table. No matter how heavy the wood is, it will float.
And if it does float, you're going to end up with a piece of wood sitting on top of a hardened piece of epoxy, and that's a lot of wasted money. One thing is, when you're always working alone, you got to figure out how to do a lot of stuff on your own. Like lifting that table slab up, I tell you that thing weighs well over 200 pounds. And so you got to figure out how to use tools or pulleys or whatever you got to raise it up. But you know what? Some way you always figure it out. Look at it, I do. So it's not a big deal. So there I am now, putting down the silicone, like I said, on that about 7 inches in. And then I will go ahead and drop that table onto the silicone. And there it goes. And I know exactly where to put it because I've outlined it. And now I'm ready to start siliconing the sides up. And again, I outlined that as well, so I know exactly where to put it. And then what I'll do is my son will come down, like he helps out, and I will drop the form onto the actual table. Now, one thing is, make sure you got enough silicone, because I go through a ton of this. I usually buy these by the box full, like 12 at a time, because they're inexpensive. I pay them about $3, and you go through a lot, and you want to make sure that you got plenty. Don't be cheap with it. When you put that form down, you want to make sure you got squeeze out, and you don't want to squeeze it all the way down, because you want that silicone to remain in between the table and the sides of the actual form. But you do want to make sure you squeeze out enough so that this way the silicone comes out, and with your finger you could just kind of smooth it over so it's nice and clean, and that ensures a nice solid seal. So at this point, my son and I are just putting the clamps around the form, and they won't be too tight like I mentioned before. But when I get to the clamps that are on for the actual slab of wood, those I'm going to crank them down and make sure they're tight to the table, as tight as possible. And the whole reason why is I want to make sure that silicone has that barrier, and I want to make sure that the wood doesn't float. But that's all there really is. At this point, the form is pretty much done, and I'll wait about at least 48 hours. I even like to go 72 before I'll start pouring my first coat, which is the dust layer. I call it the dust layer because all I do is pour resin about a quarter of an inch deep, and I just let it absorb any of the dust or debris that could be sitting on the actual form at the bottom. Hey, if you like these videos, remember to like and subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next video. Step 3, pouring the actual resin.